Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam,
And I'm Marcia.
and we like World War II media, and we want to talk about it. Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week we are talking about the third and final season of the CBC show X Company that began airing in 2015. And to briefly recap, we left our characters carrying out dangerous missions during the disastrous Dieppe raid. Tom has died, Alfred and Aurora have officially hooked up, and is Faber on their side now? What did you think of this season?
Is he? That's probably the question that has been on my mind for the entirety of season 3. I think season 2 is my favorite. So I thought season 3 was good, but you could tell they were wrapping it up a bit, which I never like. I know why they need to do it, because obviously there's not another season. But it felt a little bit rushed to me at the end for some reason. And they left behind some of the trauma in season 2, which I really liked in season 2, that they were so aware of it for the entire season. And then this season, they didn't really take it home. So I don't know. I'm on the fence about this season, and I don't know if it's because it's ending or ended. But yeah, it's an enjoyable series as a whole, but it's not my favorite season. How about you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I watched them all too close together to really differentiate the different seasons in my mind. But if they had gone through Operation Husky and D-Day, and if they had wanted to do a couple more seasons, I definitely would have been on board for that, for sure.
I agree. I think that would have been good. And I also think it would have changed, as happened in season 3 a little bit. And I think maybe the things that I didn't like as much wouldn't have happened the way they did. So overall, it's good. I did feel like it became a little bit soapy in season 3 more than in season 1 and 2. And I don't know if that's just me. It could be.
I don't think I noticed it being soapy in season 3, but like I said, I did watch them all pretty close to one another, so could be that they're all just drifting together in my mind.
Yeah. I am sad, though, that it's finished. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna miss my spies.
Exactly. I'm going to miss my found family, but might still murder each other if the mission calls for it. Spies.
All right, let's get into the episodes. In episode 1, we get our favorite character, Krystina Breland, who goes undercover to ferret out a German agent who recruited Klaus. If you remember, he was the doctor in season 2, or he worked in the POW camp in Canada. The first scene is really good, guys. Krystina, she made me scratch my head for a second because I got onto it fairly quickly. But she said some anti-Semitic things, and I was like, wait a second, what's she saying? But she's really just playing her part, guys. She's doing a very good job.
Yeah, she's in a bar and she's trying to infiltrate this anti-Semitic Nazi ring, I guess. And she references the Christie Pitts riot of 1933, which probably a lot of people haven't heard of. So I'll give you some details. On August 16th, 1933, there were a lot of Canadians who were emboldened by the rise of fascism in Europe, which, you know, might mirror some things that are happening in the world today. And they were becoming more loudly anti-Semitic. So in Toronto, some Christians formed swastika clubs to deter Jews from visiting local beaches. They would basically bring their swastika flags and make it very unfriendly for Jewish people to go there. And then during a baseball game between a Jewish team and a non-Jewish team, several spectators flew a swastika flag. And afterward, they defaced the Jewish players' clubhouse. They wrote Heil Hitler on the roof and all kinds of stuff. And then everything came to a head when the teams met up for another game 2 days later. Violence began in the stands and spilled out into the streets. And gradually, people from neighboring areas started coming in. And ultimately, over 10,000 people were drawn into the riot. The mayor of Toronto had to forbid the flying of the swastika flag, which was one of Canada's first laws against hate speech. And there's a little quote here from the Canadian Encyclopedia that I'm just going to read because it gives you some idea of the state of anti-Semitism in Canada before and during the war. Of countries that took in refugees during the Second World War, Canada accepted one of the fewest number of Jews fleeing Nazism.
Yeah, that's wild. I also watched a little video on the Krysty Pitts riot because, like you said, I had never heard of it either. And for people who probably don't realize, Hitler came to power in 1933, and even though the war starts in 1939, anti-Semitism was hot and happening all across the world as early as 1933 already. It didn't just come from nowhere, which sometimes it seems like that to me in media. But it's been around for a while.
Yeah, for people who are not super into reading up about history and they just know most of what they know from the Second World War from movies and TV shows, I think there's a sense that the Allied powers were the great heroes who freed the world from anti-Semitism, but really it's a lot more nuanced than that. There was, of course, the German Bund and the USA. There was huge Nazi-friendly gatherings in Madison Square Garden. There was Oswald Mosley in the UK, who was a fascist. The King of England actually abdicated his throne because he was a card-carrying Nazi and because he married Wallis Simpson. But, there was also the card-carrying Nazi thing. And so there really was this thing where Nazism was not as unpopular in the Allied countries as you might think.
I think it's good to remember that, especially in today's world. So thanks for this refresher.
Yeah. Faber and Sinclair meet face to face. The big dogs on either side finally meeting face to face and getting the measure of each other. And they're trying to hammer out a deal, but Sabina's disappearance is a wrench in the works. She's fucked off for a few days because she's really not enjoying this whole thing where her and Faber are going to get away and then they're not going to get away. And then she doesn't really know if he's working for the Allies or not. And it's a whole thing. As you can imagine, a stressful situation.
To be honest, neither do we. I don't know, did you trust him in episode 1 of season 3? I was like, I don't know if I trust this guy.
Yeah, his motivations for working with the Allies are understandable, but also he murdered his own child in order to continue to further his career as a Nazi. So who can say, right? I mean, he really could go either way still.
And he always does just the bare minimum of being on the good side. I didn't quite trust him yet at this point. And throughout the season, I was like, I don't know. I trust him, and then I didn't, and then I do. And then he's kind of in it only for himself and Sabina. He's doing what's best for his family, which I think you said in a previous episode. He's a real family man. And that's kind of what he's got going for him. So that's the one positive thing about him in the show. But he only does it if it's convenient for him and his wife.
Yeah, I feel like we've been talking about moral relativism quite a lot lately. And there's lots of that in this show, too.
Yes. Meanwhile, Neil, I think disobeying Sinclair's orders, goes with Harry to look for Mary, or I should say Harry goes with him to look for Mary, because she's been captured by the Germans, because at the end of season 2 she was cooped up in a bell tower, shooting at Nazis like a real pro. But then it ends with her being held at gunpoint, and we don't really know what has happened to her, but we now know that she's been taken by the Germans. And Neil has been desperately trying to figure out where she is. Sinclair's like, she's no longer useful, we have to move on. And then Neil just fucks off and goes to look for her anyway, and Harry decides to join him.
Yeah, it's not looking good for Miri, unfortunately, based on what we know about this show.
It stopped looking good the second she became Neil's love interest. You just know.
Yeah.
Like, oh no.
Yeah, no doubt. In episode 2, Sabina tells her father, a high-ranking Nazi in Himmler's inner circle, that she wants to leave Franz, but she doesn't tell him why. She's definitely honest with him on an emotional level of like, yeah, Franz is not being a great husband and our son has died and it's been really hard on me. But even on the level of that, she knows better than to sell him out and tell her father that he's working with the Allies, because that would be a death sentence. So she says she wants to leave him, but she doesn't explain really in detail.
I guess it would also pull into question, is she also working with the Allies or is she not? So I have some feelings about this father figure, this very high-ranking Nazi, who is more evil, I think, in this show than Franz, as far as evil goes. But he pretends to be okay with, at first, to be okay with their son. Only. But then later he kind of switches and it was like, well, he was an abomination. So it's kind of gross.
He's like, yeah, it's so sad that your son died, but I mean, he was a little freak show, so you can't be that sad. It's like, thanks, Dad.
And he goes on to do some more questionable things as we progress into this season that I did enjoy watching from like an entertainment point of view, but not when I realized that these things actually do happen or did happen. So
Yeah.
it's a real doozy.
They needed to bring in another big fish Nazi to be a bad guy now that Faber is maybe potentially not a bad guy. And I think that they made a good storytelling choice by having him be Sabina's father because he does have these emotional ties to her, but at the same time, he does these truly heinous things that you're just like, oh, okay.
And I don't know if they said in this season or the last season. Didn't Franz say that he joined the party to appease her father or something?
Yeah, her dad never wanted her and Franz to get married. Like he didn't approve of him. So Franz joined the Nazi party to basically get in with her dad, which, bro.
Bad choices, man.
Yeah.
Alfred and Aurora attend Franz's promotion party undercover, which seemed to me like a really risky plan, but I guess they just did it. Alfred discovered Operation Marigold, an Axis plan to increase oil production and improve their fortunes in the war. So this is our big plot for season 3.
So it'll keep resurfacing. Operation Marigold was not a real operation, but it did reflect the growing importance of oil accessibility during the war. So access to oil was part of the reason why Hitler went to war with the Soviet Union in 1941 in the first place, and also drove Rommel's actions in North Africa. And later in the war, Germany started to rely more and more heavily on synthetic gasoline from hydrogenating coal at high temperatures. It actually represented over half of Germany's total wartime oil use and 90% of the aviation gasoline for the Luftwaffe. So the synthetic gas will come up later this season as well. German synthetic oil factories were obviously a high priority target for the Allies in terms of bombing. And in the final weeks of the war, there was so little fuel remaining that German army trucks were being dragged by oxen.
I get why they would use an operation like this, but I also thought it felt a little boring for the show. I don't know why, but it almost didn't feel like high stakes enough for me.
Yeah, I guess last season, because they tied it into the Dieppe raid and it really interwove with history so wonderfully, I was kind of thinking that would happen again this season, and it didn't really. But I also think that if they had made a couple more seasons, we wouldn't notice it as much. I think if there was another season after this one that was like the big finale with, I don't know, D-Day in it or whatever, I don't think we would notice as much that this season doesn't feel as high stakes. I think it's just a natural ebb and flow throughout the making of a show kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, that does make sense. And also when you realize there's only 5 of them, how big a mission do you want to give them?
Right, for sure, yeah.
I don't know why, but this mission also kind of reminded me of the Catcher was a Spy a little. It felt a little bit like that, the kind of mission that it is. But yeah, so that's our mission for this season. And Sabina's father, it's his personal mission. It's his thing.
Yeah, so he's obviously going to be trying to stop them the whole season. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, Krystina tortures the German operative that she managed to figure out through her undercover work. But her plan is obviously to plant information that the Allies are coming for Norway. And it's fake information, of course. And so he manages to quote unquote get free, aka she let him get free. And then after he radios the information back to his superiors in Germany, and tells them that the Allies are coming for Norway, Krystina kills him. So it's a big subterfuge moment. And I actually hadn't realized until I read the unauthorized action book that invading Norway was a big pet project of Churchill's, and he really wanted that to happen. But Norway was super well fortified by the Nazis, partly because there was a lot of mineral mines there that they heavily relied on. And it had a really long coastline. So they knew that it was obviously a place that was super advantageous to have control over. And also the Allies were running convoys around sort of the north end to get supplies to the Russians. And so really, there was not really a great place or option for invading Norway, but Churchill kept bringing it up. You know, that was his whole little pet project that he wanted to happen. Norway was one of the places where the Allies had to retreat and give it up to the Germans. And for all the reasons that I said, it would have been a great strategic importance to have control over it. And in the book that I read, they also talked about how Churchill and Hitler were almost on the same brain wavelength with that, because in his mind, Hitler thought that the Allies would invade Norway. And that was part of the reason why he fortified it so heavily.
The way Krystina kills this guy, just shoots him in the stomach from close range. We also meet with her, by the way, her partner in crime is one of the two new agents, and we get to meet very briefly this season. I thought, oh look, they're gonna replace Tom for the entire season, but spoiler alert, he won't last that long.
No, he will not. Yeah, actually, the whole season where Krystina is torturing this guy, I was like, damn, like, she's pretty hardcore.
Doesn't the season start with him? He gets to do the test where he has to shoot his friend and doesn't. And then the lady's like, you failed because even your friends could be German spies.
Yeah, I have the characters' names and actors in the notes later, whenever they turn up later in the season. But yeah, definitely. That's a moment in this season for sure.
It's one of those moments at the very beginning that you think isn't a big deal, and it's so quick you kind of forget about it, but it comes back later. Because it's important that these guys failed their tests and all that. So there's something really sad about them coming up later.
Yeah.
On Neil and Harry's quest to find Miri, it's nothing but sadness, because they have to watch her be executed, be hanged by the Germans, and they fail to save her. But they do meet and begin to work with a French resistance fighter named Jacques Rigaud, played by Milo Torny. And I wanted this guy to exist in real life. I thought this was an actual guy, but he's not real, I don't think.
No, I think like many of the secondary characters, they are like amalgams of real people or loosely based on real people, but yeah, not necessarily actually real people.
He's meant to be this really inspiring guy who can unite all of France and all that, and I thought the way they've written him, he's a bit almost not spicy enough for me.
Well, I feel like he's only in the show for like a grand total of 8 minutes, so maybe it wasn't long enough for us to get a good impression.
It's true. Maybe that's part of my issue with season 3 is that they set up all these fun things and then they destroy them on purpose. Also, Miri's death scene, I was very sad, but also kind of expected it to be a little bit more than it was. She does sing a little song of resistance. Her people are Roma, and I looked up a little statistic because obviously when you think about the Holocaust, you think about Jewish people first. But there are also at least 250,000 European Roma people that were killed during World War II. And that's a low number in the sense that it's probably a lot more, but there's no proof of that. So add that to the tally of about 6 million Jews that were also killed. And it's just the amount of people that is just wild.
Absolutely.
It's so crazy to me how so many people just lost their lives in this war.
Mm-hmm. And it was nice, I think, for them to add a Roma character who was such an important part of this little resistance cell and who was fighting back against the Nazis. And they didn't exaggerate it or hit the note too hard, but, you know, you knew that she was of Roma descent and was resisting the Nazis. So I did like that aspect.
I did too, and I was kind of sad to see her die. I mean, she's not the only one who's going to die this season, but...
No, definitely not. It's really just the bodies are piling up. So, episode 3. Working with the resistance, X Company tried to rally the French as the Germans take over the remainder of France. If you recall, we discussed this briefly, I think last episode, where when the Allies invaded North Africa and took it over effectively from the Vichy French, the Germans decided that they were just going to take over the rest of France, and they were no longer going to pretend that France was independent and that the Pétain government was independent. And so the team are trying to kind of rally the French to stand up and fight back. And Faber captures and kills our French resistance fighter, Rigaud, but he's written this sort of call to arms rallying cry, and they broadcast his message regardless after his death.
Yeah. So the way they do this is in a van, and Harry's got his radio, obviously. And I think Neil is doing the speech. And they're driving around the village. And it's so fucking tense. Also because for some reason, Harry's been trying to kind of better himself after the tenseness of season 2, where he was kind of on the rocks with the team a little bit. And I was just convinced that this was going to be the end of him. I just thought, oh, he's just going to die in this van. He's going to get shot or arrested or I don't know. That feeling goes on for me for a while.
For sure. He really seems determined to, if it takes his own death, if it takes him becoming a martyr, then he's willing to do it, sort of thing, but to the point of recklessness in a lot of instances.
Yeah, I didn't like this feeling because, like Tom, I'd grown used and kind of fond of Harry.
Yeah. And of course, Harry's the baby of the team, so you know it's going to destroy everyone else if he dies.
It should, yeah. Spoiler alert, I don't think it did the way it should have. But anyway, we'll get there when we get there in the episode. Spoilers! Faber's father-in-law, Sabina's father, gets him transferred to a new project in Poland. Operation Marigold. Guess what? It's the fancy project. But by this time, Sinclair is blackmailing Faber into passing them information about Marigold. But it's not proving to be as useful as they think it is.
Faber's pretty determined to get disentangled from the Allies. He keeps being like, oh, I can't help you anymore. I have to go to Poland. And then like, oh, well, I'll give you this one more thing and then we're done. And then it just keeps not working out. I
think it was Aurora that taped Sabina saying she knew about them as spies and she hasn't told anyone yet. And they use that recording as leverage. Like, they use his family constantly because they know that Faber cares more about his family than he does about himself.
Yeah. And if you're wondering if that really pisses him off, it sure does.
Also, he was not meant to kill Rico. He just decided to do it.
He almost kind of had to, because in order to kind of save face with his superiors, he had to kill Rico. And there was like a whole plan in place where he wasn't going to do it. And then he was like, well, I had to.
No, but listen. It happens so often in this season that I don't think it's an excuse anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just, they don't want us to believe in Faber too early, you know? They want to be like, well, he still really is doing his own shit behind their back. Like, he still does whatever he wants to. He only is very reluctantly helping them out.
To be fair, it's not all his fault this season. Some other stuff happens that's not his fault.
Episode 4, Faber and Sabina are on their way to Poland to start their new chapter of Franz's career. Aurora travels with them as Sabina's friend, but also as, you know, someone there to keep an eye on them. But the train ends up being stopped by Polish resistance and everyone gets captured. And we are actually going to be doing a little episode that heavily features the Polish resistance soon. So definitely stay tuned for that. But yeah, the Soviet-Nazi Non-Aggression Pact was signed in August of 1939, and then both countries invaded Poland in September, which effectively sparked World War II. They tried to split the country up between them. And there was, of course, quite a lot of resistance in Poland. The main resistance group was the Polish Home Army. It consisted of hundreds of thousands of Poles, and it was loyal to the Polish government in exile in London. It was one of the largest underground resistance movements of World War II, and it's perhaps best known for the Warsaw Uprising of August to October of 1944, which we will talk more about when we do our Agent Zo Polish resistance episode, I assume.
If I remember correctly, the Home Army had 300,000 people in it, which is quite a lot. And I think 30,000 of those were women, which was quite a high number. I didn't know anything about Poland until maybe 2-3 months ago. And now I just realize what a goldmine it is in terms of storytelling and history, and there's so much happened to the Poles. I feel like they aren't remembered enough because not only did they have to fight the Germans, they also had to fight the Soviets. So they had war on two fronts. It's not a really fun time. And when the war ended for most of us in Europe, it did not end for the Poles.
Well, I mean, part of the reason why we don't talk as much about it is because their wartime history was suppressed by the Soviets. So there was a communist government in charge in Poland for decades after World War II, and they basically put out the story that the Polish Home Army had been working with the Nazis, and everyone who was in the Polish Home Army was therefore an enemy of the state. And they would not allow the real history to be propagated. And so, yeah, World War II casts a long shadow, I guess.
I just don't understand how countries like England, who obviously worked with the Poles quite a lot, let that happen.
I think they wanted the war to be over, and they did not want to fight the Russians, which, I mean, you know.
Fair, yeah, that's fair. But yeah, we will soon learn more about it in an episode. So I am very excited about this, and I think so is too, and I hope you are. Look forward to that. Harry, Neil, and Alfred are together, and the plan was for the train Faber and Sabina and Aurora are on to arrive to the station that Harry, Neil, and Alfred are coming into by train, to be there first so they could get them off that train, because it's a transit train for people who are being sent to concentration camps. But obviously, with the police resistance showing up and not knowing that they have this whole plan for the Allies, there's no one to take them off the train, so they are stuck on the train toward the concentration camp.
If y'all remember, Alfred is the one who has the photographic memory, and the people on the train are basically telling him their names and their families' names and their life stories, because as long as he survives, they'll be remembered and their names will be remembered, and he'll be able to tell their families what happened to them. And so they're all just coming up to him and like giving him all this information for him to remember. It's very heavy.
Yeah, I wonder how does he even cope with that? The answer is he really doesn't. It's a really tough scene to watch. They've realized that they're on the train toward the concentration camp, and they know what goes on in the camps because of the prisoner that escaped that they talked to and whose drawings of the camp they saw. So they come up with a plan to set the train on fire so it has to stop and they can get out. Which works, and they get out, and you think for a second that they're gonna get away, but then Harry is killed. Out of fucking nowhere, gets shot, and he dies, and they bury him within 10 seconds, and then they move on. I was a little bit disappointed about this scene. I didn't realize he was dead for the first 10 seconds. I was like, wait, did he just die?
I also was expecting his death scene to get perhaps a bit more drawn out, but maybe they did it that way because so often that happens in war. Someone gets killed next to you and you don't really have time to stop and think about it and grieve. You just kind of have to move on for everyone else's sake.
Yeah, all I'm thinking about is Neil, who's literally losing everybody he cares about.
I know. And Neil is also present every time someone dies. It's unfortunate for him.
The only thing Harry gets in his goodbye is Neil holding onto his glasses, as they've already buried him. If you compare it to Tom's death, I thought that was properly emotional. And then Harry's one happened so quickly and he didn't even get to sputter, like he just collapsed and that was it. And then we didn't see him again. Like, they didn't even turn him around. So I guess they did. I guess they kind of dragged him off, and I thought, is he still alive? But no, he was already gone. So I don't know. I'm just sad about it. I wanted them to mourn him a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they did react to his death in later episodes. I don't know. To me, I didn't mind that it was kind of abrupt. I was like, yeah, you know what? I guess that would be probably how it would happen.
Like, on the one hand, I'm complaining about it being soapy. And then on the other hand, I'm like, I wish there was more drama. So what the fuck do I want?
Well, listen, we're all entitled to have our own feelings and opinions about how the show went. That's all good. Aurora is offered a job in the Race and Resettlement Office in Poland under her German alias of Helena. She's still pretending to be Sabina's friend. And now she's met a new friend named Heidi Adler, played by Madeline Knight. And she's also sort of Sabina's friend, and she's the one who offers her the job. And she is a dyed-in-the-wool Nazi.
I was about to say this lady. This lady is just nasty.
Yeah, she's not great.
I like what they did in the writing of her character, where she's incredibly chipper about the resettlement of people. She's like, all these Nazis are going to get pretty houses because the people will be moved.
Yeah. She's like, oh, don't worry. The people will be gone from the house that you live in. Like, we got rid of them. And as if that's your concern. You're like, I sure hope there's no original owners of this house I'm about to live in.
Aurora is getting more and more entangled with her persona, Helena. She's like in the thick of it. She's in the same office that Franz works, but also Sabina's father works next door to her. So she's pretty close to the big bad.
For sure. And there's definitely this whole running thing where anytime she sees Sabina's father, he flirts with her a little bit. And she definitely uses that to her advantage, but
at Franz's party in the beginning, they have a dance, and it's just, it just makes me, I can't deal with it. It's so creepy.
But good for Aurora for using her hotness to get closer to this guy and get information from him, I guess.
I mean, she is pretty hot.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
In episode 5, we meet the Resistance again, and they've got Faber, and they aim to trade him for Resistance fighters. An ex-company who need him alive must attempt to facilitate the exchange. At the same time, I was like, can't they just tell them what their plan is? But I guess they can't.
No, I mean, I feel like it's one of those things where two people can keep a secret if one of them are dead. You definitely want the fewest number of people possible to know about this plan. So they're trying to keep the Resistance from killing Faber and trying to make it so that the prisoner exchange goes as chill as possible so that Faber survives.
And at this point, obviously they've lost Harry, but Alfred and New are still with the Resistance, and they're also pretending to hate Faber. And New doesn't have that hard of a time pretending to hate Faber.
Yeah, I don't think he's really putting it on too much.
There's a scene, though, where sometimes I get really confused by this show because they show murder in the most gruesome way. And then there's a scene where Faber gets pissed on by a Resistance guy and it's not shown. I'm like, why is this not shown?
They're like, I can allow some gruesome murder, but I draw the line at getting peed on.
Faber's not having a very good time, guys.
Well, yeah, deservedly, perhaps. But anyway, the Nazis, of course, they can't give the Resistance fighters back because they have already killed them. And so they disguise a bunch of Nazis as Resistance fighters. And this is all just a trap. They're going to kill the Resistance guys as soon as they show up. And Faber manages to escape. The Nazis are able to kill all the Resistance fighters, but not before one of the fighters reveals that there's a mole amongst the Germans, which of course we already know. It's Aurora. So now, unfortunately, the Nazis are going to be onto her.
Uh-oh. Can I just say, I liked the fact that Faber was obviously tied up and Neil actually hesitated about whether or not to cut him loose.
Yeah.
It's super tense. I'm like, is he going to actually leave him? But he ends up cutting him loose because he knows that if he doesn't, he's gonna screw over ex-company. In episode 6, Sinclair is back in Canada and he stops Krystina from going into the field even though she's really good and she really wants to. Instead choosing new recruits David, played by Tom Brittney, and Peter, played by Lewis Rayner, to replace Harry and Tom on a mission to blow up the Polish oil refineries. They're newbies, and New looks after them a little bit and tries to train them a bit better than they are, because these guys, they're not very good. As Krystina says to Sinclair, look, they failed their test, they're shit at what they do and they're new, so why are you not putting me into the field? And he doesn't really answer.
These are the two guys that you were talking about earlier. One of them was supposed to kill the other, well, quote unquote, kill the other in training and couldn't do it.
Yeah, he hesitated for a second too long and got shot himself in training. I did not see this coming. I honestly didn't. They are immediately captured at the oil refineries by Faber. So I was like really confused for a second. He interrogates them in front of other Nazis, and they give up a bunch of information, which is false information. And then they get shot by Faber, point blank. He just shoots them. I was like, what the fuck is going on? But that's the point. That's what you're meant to feel.
Yeah, and Sinclair knew this was going to happen. This was all part of the plan, and that's why he didn't want to send Krystina into the field.
They purposely sent them there to spread false information or to give up false information because they knew they were going to talk under pressure, and they did. And I hated this scene a little bit because Faber threatened to kill the other guy until the other guy talked, and then he shot them both. And I was like, no, the newbies, don't kill the newbies. And I was really quite upset with Sinclair for orchestrating this thing. I was pretty upset.
Yeah, it mirrors the original scene where the one guy was not able to, quote unquote, kill the other one in training, and then they're under torture. And Faber's threatening to kill his friend, and he still hesitates. He's like, no, I don't want you to die, sort of thing. So the two scenes mirror each other. It's very effective storytelling, I think. When Krystina finds out that these two guys have been killed and that Sinclair set them up, she's obviously not happy about it. But this is part of what they do, right? In order to maintain Faber's cover and plant this false information, then that's what had to happen. And that Sinclair had to make the hard choice, I guess.
And the show does this all the time. Like, it makes unpopular choices. And it's good that way. I like that it does that. But I did like these guys. I also like these guys specifically because it gave Neil a sense of purpose again. I was like, all right, Neil gets to look after the young guys. That's cool.
More characters to get killed on Neil's watch. The Nazis begin to close in on Aurora as the mole working in the Race and Resettlement office. Faber provides Alfred with the location of Operation Marigold, and this turns out to be heavily dependent on this professor named Professor Voigt, who's developing a synthetic oil, as we talked about earlier, and so that he's kind of the heart of Operation Marigold.
Killing Heisenberg, but for oil.
Right, yeah.
And there's a little side plot going on as they're closing in on Helena or Aurora. There are these Jewish women working in the office. And I almost thought for a second that Aurora was going to pin it on them, but she doesn't. Thank God she doesn't. But unfortunately, she tries to get these women out because Alfred is working at the train station and she's like, I need to get them on a train. And she almost makes it work, and then she goes to get them and they're gone from the cells. So she's too late.
The reason why they're in the cells is because, like, she didn't turn on them, but it was just assumed that if information was leaked, then it must have been these Jewish women working in the office. And so her new friend Heidi was like, well, clearly it was these Jewish secretaries, so I just dispensed with them.
The way she talks about them, too. Like, they're not even human. Mm-hmm. It's just gross. Sabina's trying to help. In her way, she wants to do something. So she's joined the women's party and she's sewing clothes. And she's just discovered that the clothes she's sewing were stolen from Jewish prisoners. And she can't really handle it. So she changes her mind in that moment and goes to Aurora and Franz and finally says, look, I want to help. I think what's going on is wrong. She changes her mind quite a lot in this season.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily that she was fine with it after Aurora told her about the camps and stuff on the train, but I think that Faber did a pretty good job of insulating her from it. And because her dad is so heavily involved, like, if you're in that situation, you maybe don't want to necessarily believe that that's true. And then when she's sewing these clothes and she sees that things have been sewn into the hems and stuff like that, and she starts to understand the truth of what's actually happening and the magnitude of it, that's when she can no longer kind of turn her head away and tell herself that it's not true.
I think I told you when I was watching, I was like, I don't like this Sabina who doesn't really know what she wants anymore. It makes sense for the series to have her be a little bit unsure about how to proceed, because she also does like her life that she has. She doesn't want to uproot herself and France. And she still believes that they're going to go away and get away from all this, which is what she really wants.
So episode 7, Aurora learns that the Nazis are going to quote unquote process the village of Nadzieja in Poland. And if processing sounds bad, it sure is. Neil and Alfred sort of go there and decide they're going to join up with the resistance there and fight against the Nazis and try and prevent this from happening.
Yeah, Alfred has some trauma in this whole fight. After the fight is done, he's kind of breaking down a little bit. And I like that they brought this back for Alfred, but I missed it with Neil. So I'm like, where did Neil's trauma go? It's just kind of gone. Like, we don't see him struggle with his German radio operator that he was struggling with before in season 2. And we don't really see him struggle with Neri either. I like Neil being the troubled one.
Again, not something I particularly noticed, but again, I did watch them all back to back, so.
Yeah. Aurora finagles an invitation to an exclusive event in Berlin. Professor Voigt is going to be there, the synthetic oil inventor, because he will be making a speech and getting an award, I think. And many key Nazis will be there. And the way Aurora gets this invitation is they're at some party again. I think they're hunting outside at this manor house. And this hunting scene I could do without. I never want to think about it again.
Because she's been flirting with Sabina's father, she's become part of this circle of Nazis who hang out together, including her friend Heidi. So they go on this little hunting expedition, and Heidi's used to being the one lady who's involved, who's allowed to go. And then Aurora sort of gets herself involved as well. But then it becomes the most dangerous game where they're hunting Jewish people. And it's very traumatizing, understandably, for Aurora.
Yeah, I liked how they did this, but man, it's so tough to watch. You can tell that Aurora is really struggling with her trying to still remain herself, but also being Helena. And she's in this awful situation where she's not alone. Sabina's father is right there, and so is Heidi. So she has to shoot a Jewish person up close in front of them, and she can't break. And she does break a little. She even tries to tell them it doesn't really seem like good sport to try and get out of it, but then they make her do it anyway. This was really hard to watch.
Yeah, almost feels like she has to justify it to herself as like a mercy kill, because if she doesn't shoot this guy, probably worse things will happen to them.
Yeah.
Sabina's father, quote unquote, acquires a new kid for them, stolen from a Polish village. And we talked about the Lebensborn program a bit in season 1. The plotline with Sabina's quote unquote new child did happen in real life. This program would repatriate children with the quote unquote right racial features to be adopted by German families. So as the German army moved across the continent, they would take kids from other countries. And the German families with whom they were placed would believe they'd been orphaned by the war. They would have no idea that their parents had been potentially captured, taken away, killed, whatever the case was. And Aurora and Faber say a few incriminating things to one another, which is significant because Heidi is in the other room overhearing it. And they share an angry kiss, which Heidi also witnesses. And we were like, girl, no. Oh my God.
Aurora, what are you doing?
When I first watched it, I put in the chat, Aurora, no, in all caps. And Mart was like, what happens? And I was like, you'll know when it happens. And then it happened. And you were like, it's happened. Aurora, no.
I have to give it to this actress playing Aurora because she does a great job at portraying both want and absolute disgust in the same moment. Like, it's really well acted.
Yeah, it's such a weirdly tense scene. Like, after they kiss, you're like, Aurora, why? But in your mind, you can kind of, they've just been tossed in together into this really absurd, tension-filled situation for so long that, I don't know, man, like, it makes sense in the context of the show, but also you're like, that's, I guess, how you can tell that Aurora is getting sort of confused with her character, Helena, that she's been playing for so long.
In the background, Alfred is trying to get something to do with what is it again? Train codes or something from the train. He works at the train station, and the boss of the train station has this little booklet that he's supposed to get, and he's flirting with his daughter, and you can tell that Aurora doesn't like it. So there's also a little bit of jealousy going on, like, in the background. And then she kisses Faber, and you're like, girl, what are you doing?
Yeah, that was really something for sure.
I did like this whole plot with Alfred having to pretend to be this other guy.
Initially, Alfred didn't really do undercover stuff. It was really like a Tom and Aurora job mainly. And then he sort of got better at being a spy. So now he gets to do the more big ticket stuff.
So we're slowly nearing the end of the series. In episode 8, Sabina's father figures out that Faber is a double agent. Oh no! But Faber then explains that he was only pretending to be a double agent, and he's tracked down Sinclair's son in a Japanese POW camp and has had him transported to Berlin in order to more effectively infiltrate the Allied intelligence. Which he has, like, he's got this whole, like, backup plan for himself.
I think that he probably just did that because the Allies have leverage on him, so he wants to have leverage back. Like, I don't know that he ever necessarily intended for Sabina's father to find out and to turn into a triple agent sort of thing. But yeah, now, it's a pretty convenient for him now that he has been figured out to be like, no, I'm being sneaky.
Yeah, I'm doing this on purpose. I thought it got kind of muddy at this point. But I think that we're not supposed to really know what is the truth at this point, because you're supposed to figure it out at the end of the next episode.
Yeah, he's really tap dancing for his life, it feels like, you know? Just, he's juggling a lot of plates.
The child that Sabina's father has brought in for them, he's once again really good with this girl. They're making him out to be this really good father. And there's a point to it, because you need to believe that he would do anything for his child.
Yeah. And Heidi, meanwhile, she was there, of course, in the last episode when Faber and Aurora were whispering to each other and then made out for a hot second. She reveals that she knows Aurora's a spy, and she tricks her into going into this cell, and she locks her up, and she attempts to interrogate her. But then Aurora manages to escape, and Heidi chases her, and it's a whole thing. And then Aurora murders her, I'm pretty sure with her bare hands. Doesn't she choke her out in the long grass?
Yes. She chokes her out, but not before saying, "You were killed by a Jew," very deliberately. This was so tense. And also, Neil and Alfred have figured out that Aurora is in danger, so they've gone after her. And they get there after she's done killing Heidi. She's become a little bit despondent almost. After she's killed her, she's like, had to be done. Had to do it. Let's move on. And they can tell that she's really struggling with this persona that she's trying to keep up. In episode 9, all of X Company converges on Berlin, including Sinclair and Krystina, because they have to assassinate Professor Voight, and they must, I guess all of them must do that. I don't know why they all have to be there, but I guess they do all have to be there.
I think it's one of those things where if you come for the king, you best not miss. Like, they're only going to have one shot, so they want to have everybody so they can have all these different moving parts to this plan.
But then they find out that Faber has Sinclair's son, and they have to trade their leverage that they have on Faber to get Sinclair's son William to safety. So it's a whole thing, like, they come to murder Professor Voight, but instead they have to go and give up their leverage.
Yep. And then Faber betrays them, not necessarily because he would anyway, but I think he doesn't really have a choice in this instance because Sabina's father and everyone is onto him, and they obviously know. So he betrays them. Sinclair and Neil get captured, and then Sinclair, unfortunately, has to sacrifice himself so that Neil can escape and help Aurora to carry out the remainder of this plan.
I thought this was stupid. Let me tell you why. I don't think the idea of him buying Neil time was stupid, but I don't see why they couldn't have just fought their way out of there together.
Yeah, I think that if the show were to go on for another season or two, I don't think they would have killed off Sinclair at this moment. It didn't seem strictly necessary for the story. I agree with that.
I did like the idea that he was like, if they're gonna torture my son in front of me, I am going to talk. So I either get out of here or I kill myself. I do get that because he thought he was gonna give up secrets. But then the way he dies is by suicide. And I'm like, really? Can you not just first try to get out of there? But I get your point. The show is ending, and he needed to do something heroic. But I just liked him so much. Like, can we just not have one person that we love kind of stay alive?
Well, I think too, it's going to parallel something that happens in the last episode where he feels obligated to do this because of his son or for his son. So we're about to get that storytelling parallel that'll come full circle in episode 10.
Stop being so smart and reasonable, Sam. I just want to hate this choice. As they're trying to set up their plan to kill Void, that they have a whole plan that's really complicated and involves a lot of moving parts and a lot of moving people. Aurora and Alfred find each other, and Aurora is like, I don't know who I am anymore. And Alfred is like, I know who you are. And then they sleep together. Finally!
Yeah, finally they smash. It's been a long time coming.
But in like the most inconvenient place and time.
Yeah. But I guess that's what makes it like fun and sexy because it's kind of dangerous.
Do they even still love each other, or is this just kind of a please remind me I'm still alive kind of smash?
Yeah. I mean, that's allowed too, I guess. Well, episode 10. Neil is captured. Unfortunately, he doesn't manage to fully escape and he faces interrogation, but he gets out of it by pretending to make a deal with Faber second. And meanwhile, Alfred and Krystina are out there trying to discover what happened to him. So all of this is kind of happening in the background of this main plot line that involves Aurora and Faber.
I have some feelings about Faber's second guy, the new one, because first from the last season was an asshole, but this guy really likes Faber. He's really trying really hard to impress him all the time. And he's kind of a young guy, and he's kind of stupid for making this deal. Because you can just tell that no way you're gonna keep his end of the bargain.
Yeah, but he's so young, right? Like, this guy is just, of course, Neil's gonna be able to manipulate him. He's had a ton of practice doing it.
Yeah. He does get beat up quite badly, but he's been through that before, I think. So it's like no big deal. And he manages to get away with Sinclair's son, so he lives. That's good. We don't see him again after this, but he lives. In a very tense moment where Aurora is arrested because they figured her out. Faber, at the very last minute, decides whose side he's on, finally, once and for all. And kills Professor Voight and also himself in his son's memory. So he finally decides, I'm going to be on the right side.
Yeah, Aurora is bringing up with him this thing that he had said about his own son when he was talking about his grief over having killed Uli. And he was saying that because his son had Down syndrome, he was like, yeah, when he felt something, he can only feel one thing at a time. So when he was happy, you knew that he was happy. And this was something that really profoundly affected Faber. And so Aurora brings it up with him. She kind of throws that back in his face at the last minute and reminds him of what he was forced to do to this son that he loved so much. And then he decides to sacrifice himself at the moment when it counts.
Again, I'm wondering here, did he really have to die? But I guess he did, because that's the only way he can get redemption. And I did, to give myself a little pat on the back. At the end of season 2, I said to you, after we finished recording, the only way Faber can really redeem himself is by dying at the end. So yeah.
Yeah, I think he had to. I don't think there's any, narratively, I don't think there's any way you could not kill Faber at the end of this season.
No, true. So Aurora goes to Sabina and tells her about Franz, and they cry together, which I thought was quite sweet. And then they all go home on the plane, and they all jump out at different moments. I thought this was quite nice, actually. And Neil is reunited with his niece. Sabina joins the Polish resistance, and I thought this was really fun to see her join the Polish resistance, finally being able to actually do something. And Alfred and Krystina return to Camp X, where Alfred trains new recruits.
Yeah. And Aurora goes back undercover in Germany, and the work continues because, of course, it's, still 1942. So there's quite a lot of war left. And then that's it. That's the end of the show.
No, I want more.
Yeah. It was really nice to see Sabina get a chance to, because we've kind of seen her as someone who's super naive and really sheltered, but ultimately when she does find out that bad things are happening, she does not want to be involved and she wants to prevent them from happening. So even though she's kind of a spoiled, sheltered person, she means well, I think. And so to get to see her move away once Franz has died, then she's freed from kind of participating in this Nazi hierarchy situation, for her to move away from that and get a chance to potentially redeem herself later and to bring this little girl back to her people where she belongs. I really liked that. And I also really liked Neil getting to reunite with his niece, because his whole thing is he keeps losing people and his family was killed and he didn't have anyone, but he had this niece that he was always writing to. So I thought that was a nice way to tie up his storyline too.
Yeah, I also thought it was nice. I don't know if you noticed this, probably you did, but Sabina, she literally lets her hair down when she joins the resistance. Her hair's down, it's a different color, like she's broken free of the grip of the Nazis. Almost visually too, and I thought that was quite nice. And I would have liked to have seen another season of her with the resistance as well.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that had they wanted to do more seasons, they definitely could have.
And I like Alfred being the one who's training new agents. It's kind of a parallel to him. And I think they even do a little parallel of him leading a new agent into the halls of X Company, while we also see him in the first episode entering X Company and seeing all this stuff for the first time. They do quite a nice roundup at the very end with some scenes from the beginning and throughout the series. But it also made me sad because there's no more.
I know. I agree. With regard to Real Camp X, there was a decline in the need for covert agents later in the war, so they closed the training school there in the fall of 1944, though Hydra, the telecommunications system, continued to operate until the war ended in Europe. After the war, Hydra operations were shifted to Ottawa and continued there for many years.
I'm just really glad we watched this show, really. So I would like to rate it.
Yeah, so I think we're going to rate it, girl, no, don't kiss that Nazi, out of 10, because... Listen, we had lots of visceral, intense reactions to things that happened in this show, but that one definitely made me be like, what the fuck? So I'm going to rate this show 8, girl, no, don't kiss that Nazi, out of 10. I really enjoy, well, as always, learning new things, kind of a perspective of history that we haven't necessarily seen before. For me, obviously, I like talking about perhaps lesser known Canadian history and bringing that to people and learning a lot more about it myself. And I enjoyed that there were, in this ensemble of characters, I felt that they were all pretty fleshed out. They had different kinds of interesting relationships with one another. We had a few female characters who actually had something to do, that they were all quite different from one another. They all had different motivations and they all behaved in different ways. And I quite liked that. And I thought the whole thing where, as we've said, we sort of could tell that the only way for Faber to redeem himself was to die at the end of the 3rd season. But nothing about it was a given. They did a really good job of making it so that you never really know what side he's going to come down on. It really is the big question. And I just think that the storytelling was really good. I love watching spy shit, and I really enjoyed it. I think I'll probably watch it again at some point.
I agree. I also will watch it again for numerous reasons. I specifically like season 1 and 2. I also like 3, but not as much as 1 and 2. But I'm gonna give it maybe an 8.4. Girl, don't kiss that Nazi, out of 10. I like the nuance with which it tackled things like killing. It never seemed easy or particularly heroic, the way sometimes American media portrays killing people. And you've pretty much said everything else that I also wanted to say, so I'm gonna keep it short, and I'm just gonna say spies many times, and that's why it gets a high rating for me.
Yeah, I think Other Canadians, if you're used to shows on the CBC, this is not like those other shows in a lot of ways, I think. Like you said, it's quite violent. They really don't pull any punches.
I wish more people in Europe were able to watch it because I had to jump through some semi-legal hoops to watch it. Try and find a way to watch it, guys. It's really fun. And then come talk to us about it on Instagram.
Yes, definitely send us a message about it. Tell us about all your feelings. Tell us why your favorite character is Neil, because he's clearly the best. Neil and Krystina are my favorites, everyone. I said that up top, and I stand by it.
I think mine is also Neil, so I'm boring. Anyway, thank you so much for listening.
Wait, what are you reading?
What am I reading? Am I reading anything? I don't know. I don't remember what I'm reading, Sam. I'm sorry. What are you reading?
I'm reading a book that was recommended to me in Teachers College, and I picked up a copy years ago, and I had never read it, so I'm reading it now. It's called Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv, and he's a journalist, and he sort of tries to pull together scientific studies and anecdotal stories in order to draw a line between the vanishing opportunities for kids to engage in unstructured play outside in green spaces and the rise in like childhood depression and ADHD and that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It's interesting to read about.
Something different for sure. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. You can follow us and comment to us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast. You can visit our website, rosieTheReviewer.com, where you can actually find some goods nowadays. So please do. And what else can you do? Please send all these X-Company episodes to all your friends, because we need an X-Company revival in 2025, please. Thank you. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.